just kind of set it up. So we're here today with Peter Brimelow at Chicago Hilton. It's October 3rd, 2008. So, Peter, you wrote Alien Nation in 1995. In terms of immigration, what has changed or not changed since then?
Well, in terms of immigration, I guess I should look into the camera. Obviously there's been a lot more immigration, and so the situation can become radically worse, and you know, things that should have been done then would have made things very much better now, and it's going to be hard it's going to be that much harder to impose a moratorium and so on. I guess two things occurred to me. One is it's absolutely clear that the political establishment is not going to respond to immigration as an issue. On the other hand, it's also true that, you know, the American people are basically growing a new head here. The organization of anti-immigration forces is so much better than it was then, and so many people are more aware of the arguments. And of course the internet and you know, videos and so on, that's really made a tremendous difference. I'm always impressed when I look at the threads that newspapers now have to append to their articles, you know, the comment threads. They're worth reading because it's fascinating to see how many people do grasp their arguments out there, and so when they see something stupid in the MSM, they'll nail it immediately.
Right, so really, to boil this down, because I think I really agree with you, let's see if we're kind of saying the same thing, we're thinking the same thing. So in other words, really, in a way, nothing's changed. I mean, certainly in terms of our elites, in terms of our laws, in terms of the top-down imposition, it's essentially the same. Open borders, lots and lots of cheap labor, you know, things of that ilk. But from the bottom up, what we're seeing is more organization. People seem to be a little better informed, and hopefully are, you know.
Right. Well, what I said in Alien Nation is that the longer reform is put off, and I would include legal immigration reform as well in this, the rougher it's going to be, the tougher the final crackdown will be, and that's what's happening. It's building up a bigger and bigger head of steam, this issue. It's actually quite similar to the collapse of the financial system, you know. They kept staving off problems, and also ultimately that a bigger and bigger problem grows up and finally comes and nothing can stop it.
So, Peter, anti-immigrant is often used as an all-purpose slur among what we term the open borders set. So would you characterize VDARE as anti-immigrant?
Well, of course, it's absurd on its face because I am an immigrant. What they should be saying is anti-immigration. But they're not going to do that because they're in the business of suppressing all debate and you know, smearing rather than answering arguments. Well, we get email all the time from immigrants who are upset about the current situation, and Hispanic immigrants, Chinese immigrants, the whole thing. And of course, immigrants don't have these romantic ideas about immigration that a lot of American intellectuals and journalists do, because they've been through the system. They know it stinks. They know how badly broken it is, and they have no illusions about who's coming in because they live with these people. So they're perfectly well aware of how many dysfunctional immigrants there are in the country, and it annoys them, you know, in some ways more than it annoys the native-born Americans.
But in the modern world, being anti-immigration is considered the ultimate evil. So I mean, how would you respond to that? So in other words, if you say I'd like there to be less immigration, there are people who will look at you aghast. Right. Or start trotting out all the tropes.
You know, as you know, I opened up Alien Nation in '95 by saying that there's a sense in which immigration policy can be viewed as Hitler's posthumous revenge on the United States, because the effort of fighting Nazism for one reason or another made a lot of people go overboard on the other side, to the point where they don't believe that there's such a thing as a nation, that this is somehow an evil and quote-unquote racist thing. My answer to the charge of racism is ultimately, you know, the charge of treason. I mean, these people on the other side, they wish to dismantle America. That's what they're in the business of doing. They have no loyalty to the community and institutions that existed here in 1970 when the Immigration Act kicked in. They want to transform it, and it seems to me this is treason. I think, for example, President Bush should have been impeached for not upholding the law on the borders.
So when you debated economist Julian Simon on the Charlie Rose Show in 1995, he insisted that nothing important in America would be changed as a result of mass immigration. So was he right?
Well, of course, it's lunatic. And Julian was a very strange figure, because if you actually read his works on immigration, And he wasn't an immigration specialist. This was something he did as a hobby. He was a marketing specialist. His work on immigration was really a form of journalism. But there were things in there which contradicted everything he would say in his public statements. And he, for example, he invented this concept of negative human capital externalities, which basically means if you fill the country with foreigners, it doesn't work as well as when everybody understands the same language and so on. And he was very proud of this concept. But of course, it directly refused what he was saying on Charlie Rose. There is a point at which the country will stog up if it's full of immigrants and who don't speak the language, and it causes other what economists call transaction costs. But you know, Julian, people think he was in favour of open borders, but he wasn't. He never actually said that in his books. It's just his supporters thought he was.
That's interesting. It didn't come across that way in Charlie Rose.
No, he's much more careful in his published work than he was when he appeared in public. And people would quote him, you know, people like Steve Forbes and so on. But you know, he was almost impossible to read. His stuff was almost unreadable. So I'm probably the only person in the world who ever read his big book on immigration. But there's a lot of interesting material in it, which, as I say, can be used against him. Used against this sort of Simonite position.
To change direction slightly, the SPLC, having termed you and your organization a hate group, seems to feel that a predominantly white America or white Protestant America would be a bad thing. What do you say to that?
I think that you can, well, cause we've turned them a treason group. We've named them a treason group, so I guess we're equal. I think it is true that they're motivated by a hatred of America as it currently exists, and they want to see it transformed. And you know, this country was 90% white in 1960, before the Immigration Act kicked in. And you know, it seems to me you have to show a positive case why it has to be transformed. What was wrong with it as it existed in 1960? You know, why do you want to transform it? Particularly in a way which is unprecedented in the history of the world. I mean, there's never been a country that's gone through a demographic transition like the US is going through, a transformation like the US is going through now. And you have to show some positive reason for it.
By what authority does the SPLC determine who is and who isn't racist?
Well, I think it's by the authority of their huge endowment. I mean, they're a great inspiration to all of us in the non-profit world because they've raised so much money on their causes. You're right, it's just a question of wild assertions. Daniel Webster once said the law is whatever's boldly asserted and plausibly maintained, and that's what they've been able to do. And as I say, it goes back to Hitler's revenge. I mean, a lot of people are so traumatized by the idea of race and the charge of racism that they simply stop thinking. There's a poisonous element in American national life, the SPLC. And what they're doing is actually in some ways really wicked, because a lot of people out there who remember the Holocaust and so on and had relatives killed there in it, and they're going around telling that there's going to be another Holocaust and raising lots and lots of money on it. And you know, I'm sure there are a lot of old people out there who are really, really frightened and think that the Ku Klux Klan rules Chicago and all this kind of thing. And the SPLC is in the business of frightening them some more and getting more money out of them.
Right. To get away from the SPLC, which most of us would like to do, I've noticed that you defend the authors of the 1965 Immigration Act. You've said repeatedly that they themselves did not anticipate what the bill would unleash in terms of third world immigration. 20 years later, after the multiple shamnesty debacles, do you still stand by that statement?
Whether the authors of the 65 Act knew what was going to happen.
Well, they certainly said publicly.
Yes.
They intended. I guess my question is, and I've heard you assert publicly that, in essence, exonerating them, saying they didn't know what they were unleashing. My question is, why do we think that? Why do you think that? Why do you exonerate them? Is there a reason?
Well, I guess I think that stupidity plays a major role in human affairs, and rather than the idea that people like Ted Kennedy actually knew what was going to happen. I think that a lot of politicians simply take stands for emotional reasons. On the other hand, Jay, I think there is some evidence that some of the people who designed the act knew what was going to happen. Some of the officials in the Justice Department and so on.